get started since it's about that time. So welcome to Drupal 101. So who here doesn't know anything about Drupal or has not used Drupal before? Excellent. So a few people. So that's good. So let's talk a bit about what Drupal is and how it works. Well, the first thing is Drupal is a content management system. So let's talk about what that means. What does it mean to manage content? Or for content management? All right. So on a traditional sort of static website, we call it, but a website, the way that it's easiest to conceptualize, is when you're browsing to it, you type in a URL, and that URL goes to a file, usually an HTML file, but sometimes a different kind of file. So when you have a website, you have a bunch of files that are somewhere. Each of those files has a URL, and as you click things, you download different files that have markup in them, and the browser renders it. But that's generally not enough for a web page. So you end up having to do more complicated things in your static site. So you have all these URLs and all these files. The tracking on this is a bit weird. I'm not getting the whole slide. We will do, oh, I need to start recording too. All right, so we're gonna start the recording a little bit late. Anyways, so we'll run it like this, so you guys can see. Anyways, when you have a static site, you generally end up in this situation where you want to have a home page or a summary page to sort of list out everything on your site. So you have one of those files is a summary of the others and has links to the other pages, and you still have URLs to all of those. But this creates a bit of a problem because now you have a page that needs to be updated. Every time you're adding one file, you're actually you have to touch at least this other file and update the list of everything that's going on. And then let's say you wanted to make bigger changes, like to the look or feel of it, then you have to update all of your files. And there's different technologies to sort of make this easier, but you do run into this problem where small changes sometimes necessitate lots of changes. So, how can we do things different with a content management system? Well, the content from a content management system is dynamic. Whether you're asking for a specific URL for a specific page, or you're asking for a landing page, you're asking the system to generate this page for you based on the information that it knows, which means that you can ask it some interesting questions. So let's imagine our content management here. Our content management system has, in this case, 4 pieces of content. Each of these content has a type indicating what kind of content it is, and then a title. So we have a newsletter post called First Newsletter, an event called First Event, and then another newsletter called Second Newsletter, and another event called Second Event that we've stuck into this database. What this means is, with the content management system, instead of just asking for files and URLs, we can ask interesting questions. So just sort of the basic one is, give me content number 1, which is the first newsletter. But because we're talking to a system, a database that has all this tracked, we can ask interesting questions like, give me all of the events. And because it knows what the events are, it can give you all the events. So it will show you first event and second event. So it's the real advantage of the content management system versus just having things statically. The other thing that we can do is we can have different types of content in the system. These different types of content share the same sort of model or schema. So there's the similar, the way they're laid out and the data that they store is similar. So we can expand on our example a little bit where we have our newsletter post. And so the newsletter has a title, it has the newsletter, it has the newsletter belongs to, it has the authors, it has some text, and an event has a title, a start time, and end time in text. So we have 2 different pieces of content, and then they have the schemas that are connected to them. This also means that we can classify and organize the content in our system. So in Drupal, we have taxonomies for this, but they give us different ways to list out terms that we can apply to different pieces of content or other things. And we can have different vocabularies of terms, so different kinds of classification for different things. And so this way we can group different kinds of content together for all kinds of other reasons. So here, looking back at our content management system, we've added a taxonomy called track. So we have a track called code and a track called management on those. And by adding this metadata to the content in our content management system, we can do things like, hey, give me everything you know about management. And the content management system can reply with, hey, this is the pieces of content that are about management. All right, so that's content management in general. So let's talk more specifically about Drupal. So what is Drupal? If anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me at any time, too. So Drupal is a free and open source content management system. It is generally an expandable sort of platform for building things on. And so it's not usually deployed as an out-of-the-box solution. You do have to configure it. Drupal is written in PHP. And since Drupal 8, Drupal has been a Symfony application. So if you're already familiar with PHP and Symfony framework, then you have a good understanding of what Drupal is. And then generally, Drupal also needs to be backed by a MySQL style database, so MySQL or MariaDB. So some Drupal history. Drupal at this point has been around for a very long time. It was first written as a bulletin board system in 2000, which is a long, long time ago. In 2006, the not-for-profit was created to sort of manage, to own the copyright and manage resources. In 2008, DrupalCon Inc. was formed to manage community conferences and events. And then in 2011, that became the Drupal Association, which is the main body that manages the Drupal project and Drupal cons. So that's starting to be a while ago. This slide was getting pretty dated. So let's talk about something else about Drupal that's important to know, especially if you're coming into Drupal now, especially if you're here and sort of inheriting Drupal sites. We'll talk about Drupal versions, because that is an important part of Drupal, especially to know where you are. So from 2008 to 2016, that's when Drupal 6 was around. But we'll skip into sort of, I guess we're not skipping because we're going to Drupal 7. Drupal 7, or Drupal 6, Drupal 7, and Drupal 8 were fairly large rewrites of the system. So they're very different platforms. From Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, object orientation was sort of introduced, and Drupal 7 had more object-oriented components. Before that, Drupal 6 was worked on PHP 4, so there's no object-oriented. By the time we get to Drupal 8, Drupal 8 is a full Symfony framework application, which is entirely object-oriented. So Drupal still has some functional stuff, but is mostly object-oriented because of that. I guess I should also add, from Drupal 8, Drupal 9, 10, 11, and 12 are incremental upgrades, mostly of Symfony. And so they're all very compatible. You can upgrade from them. Upgrading from Drupal 6 or Drupal 7 to the next version of Drupal is not a straight upgrade, because if you have custom code, it's going to work completely differently in Drupal 7. Because of this, you can kind of see the supported from launch to end of life for Drupal 7 is very long, and the end of life for Drupal 7 is actually after the end of lives for Drupal 8 and 9. And so this is important to sort of see if you're new to the Drupal world and you have inherited a Drupal site to know where you are. The current Drupal is Drupal 11. So if you're on 12, or sorry, 10, that's still supported. If you're on 12, yeah, it's not out yet. Don't do that in production. So 11 and 10 are good. If you're on 7, you have a Drupal 7 site, you need an upgrade. You're on the old one, but it's a project, so plan for that. If you're on Drupal 8, someone hasn't been supporting your website because you do have an upgrade path. So just something to understand here. All right, so now with that not fun part out of the way, so what is Drupal? So Drupal, it's a framework for building applications, but the focus is really building it in the GUI. So you have a UI to put everything together. Due to the large number of features in Drupal, even out of the box, it can sometimes be overwhelming to know where everything is. Also, in Drupal, features tend to be written very generically, so you can build whatever functionality you want out of them. And then you have to configure your specific functionality. Everything in Drupal is written in a very modular way. So all the functionality is written into small components that can be enabled and disabled. And if you need to write your own, you can just write a module and change almost anything about Drupal, almost any of its functionality. So if you have a Drupal application, you don't actually have to edit, you don't have to make changes to Drupal. You can just write your own module, and then you can not break your upgrade path by, there we are. Apparently, clicking to change the thing doesn't tell it that I'm still here. So yeah, if you can still upgrade Drupal because all of your own functionality that you've written would be in your own modules. Yeah, and because of this functionality, it is a very popular and good platform for building web applications. So the functionality is contained in what Drupal calls modules. There are, for the most part, 2 kinds of modules that people will talk about that mean different things. People will talk about core modules. These are modules and functionality that come along with Drupal. When you download Drupal, they come with it and you can enable them. Or they're contributed modules. And these are modules that are hosted on Drupal.org that are written by the general community. All right, so let's take a look at Drupal. So we're going to boot up a current version of Drupal. Where are we? So here we're logged into Drupal with the basic theme. This is the new menu for anyone who's looking at it. They've changed it. You may not see this menu. You may see a menu that is, let's load up a different site. Okay. Let's log into this one, just because I know I can log into it. We'll log in a second. Anyways, it'll be a black bar at the top, but the options will be essentially the same. And the important things are going to be, there's going to be a tab called Content, Structure, Appearance, Extend, Configuration, People, and Reports. Not you. There we are. And these different panels give you access to different parts of Drupal. Okay, so let's talk about how you actually, let's connect the two things we're talking about together. How do you actually use Drupal for content management? So the main pieces of content, Drupal has lots of different ways of storing content, but the main piece of content are these things called nodes. Drupal also refers to them as content and content type quite frequently, but in its back end it's called nodes. Nodes come with a lot of built-in features. They record authoring information. They have pages and URLs that go directly to them. They have a bunch of flags like sticky or published, and they can support comments. There's another type of content you can have called comments. They are designed to be threaded, so they have metadata about a comment they might be commenting on and things like that, and can be related to this. They also come with a moderation system, so that they can be in an approved or unapproved state. There's taxonomies and terms. So another piece of content you can enter into the system. They're generally a name and a description and grouped together into things called vocabularies. So you can create a bunch of those. The content blocks is another common one you'll see. A content block is a custom bit of content that doesn't have its own page, but you can actually position it onto any page that you want. Another important piece of content are users. Users are content, but they have some special things. Obviously, they can log in, they have access control, they have permissions, they have some other sort of authoring information, and users are how people interact with Drupal. So to have an account on Drupal is your user, but the user itself is a piece of content as far as Drupal is concerned. Another piece of content are media. This is going to be the wrapper around different pieces of media, whether that's a PDF or an image or a video. All of these things are going to have metadata about sort of what that is. And what those are files. So files are another thing. So any file Drupal stores, Drupal is also managing it. So all of these things are different kinds of content that you can add to your Drupal site. Keeps going and going. Menus. So all the items in menus, they have their own metadata about how they work. So if you want to set up menus, you can create menu items and then position a menu somewhere. And good websites tend to need menus. And then there's many more, and there's contributed modules that add other kinds of content to your site for doing specific tasks. So there's messages, paragraphs, profiles, for doing all kinds of different things and offering different functionality into your site. But all of those aside, from all these different contents that serve their specific purposes, you still need a way to control the metadata that you're adding onto them. And the way that this is done in Drupal is that we have fields. So fields are the way that we store data on things. Any of the previous kind of content that we talked about, you can customize the fields that you attach to them. So you can attach lots of different fields for storing different kinds of metadata and make different types of things. Fields have a few concepts that you need to sort of understand to get how you're interacting with Drupal. They have a type, and they have a cardinality, and then they have widgets and formatters. So the type is pretty straightforward. This is just the kind of data that you're storing in this field. So Drupal comes with a whole bunch depending on what you want to do. You can store a Boolean, such as the true or false. You can store a date, an email, times, time ranges, lists of things, so if you want to have options. If you want to have references, so a reference to another piece of content, that's the kind of field you can add to. Numbers, links, and you can also download contributed modules that offer other kinds of field type. So if you want to have a field that stores geographical data, or GPS coordinates, or mapping polygons, or anything like that, you can download the module of that and create fields that can store that kind of data. Fields also have a cardinality. So cardinality is just the number of values that field is allowed to have in that instance. So usually the answer to that is you can be, this field only has one of these. You can only set one of these data points. So if you have a newsletter post and it has, going way back to the beginning of the slide, where it had a track, you could say how many tracks are you allowed to set on this? It could just be one, or could it be infinite, or are you allowed to be in 2 tracks? So cardinality is just the number of values that field is allowed to have in the system. Widget is also a configurable item. So this is on the form. When you're editing a piece of content and it has this field, what is the UI that you're getting to edit that data? So with text, it's usually a text box and doesn't really change much, but for something like a date or a time picker, there's lots and lots of different options for how you want to allow somebody to input that. Is it going to just be is it going to be a specific kind of date picker? Are you going to give them a calendar? Are you going to give them a time? That sort of thing. If it's a reference to another kind of entity, is it going to be a select list that you pick from a fixed option? Is it going to be an autocomplete because you have lots of options? These are widgets, so you can control what the authoring experience is for the piece of content you're setting up. Formatter is the inverse. So this is when the data is being rendered. This is how that data shows up if you're looking at it. So same sort of thing with a date. When you're looking at dates, there's lots of ways that dates and times can be rendered, a million different formats they can render in. Are you showing the full date, the exact time with seconds? Are you showing the time zone? Is it just the date? Are you just showing the day? That kind of thing. How that is rendered is controlled by the formatter, and then of course different field types have different formatters. The other thing in Drupal, because we can configure this, we can also set up different forms and different displays. So the form is how we're editing something, and this is where we choose what widgets we're going to use to edit the item. And then displays are the ways that we choose to render that piece of content. Now, because we're using a content management system, and we can go ask those questions, being like, hey, show me an event. We can have different displays where we can ask, hey, Drupal, show me an event this way. And we can configure different ways an event could show up. So we could have its page display, where it shows all kinds of information about it, but we could also have its calendar display. This is the way an event shows up when it's in a calendar, and it just shows its title and maybe the time. And so you can set up as many of those for the different piece of content as you want, so that the piece of content knows how to, or Drupal knows how to render that piece of content given the context of where it's being rendered. Oh, and that's the end of that. So yes, we got 5 minutes. We can look at some Drupal if you want, or if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any of your Drupal questions. Yeah. Yes, cardinality can be changed later. Yeah. Yeah, it is configurable, because it really is a limitation on the UI, not in the way that it's created in the database. Any other questions about things? All right.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Any new concepts being introduced in Drupal 12?
Any new concepts?
Like you walked through the background items.
Oh, okay.
Which I think hasn't been changed for a while, but I'm just curious if.
So actually, most of the things that we looked at here date back all the way to Drupal 7.
Yeah.
So this is all of these kinds of things are have remained the same. These are sort of the core of how Drupal has worked for a long time. Even in Drupal 5 and 6, we still have nodes and stuff like that. In Drupal 6, that's when fields were introduced as a contributed module called Content Construction Kit that let you on your different node types, add these different kinds of data to them. And then that was standardized. The way that this all worked was very standardized in Drupal 7, and that's been ported forward. So one of the things that has really remained very similar between all the Drupal versions is the concept of how the content management is done and how you build things. What has changed between the Drupal versions is generally the technology underneath. So to make the concepts have remained the same from the interface, but a lot of the technology that does that has been changed and advanced to allow for more features, new features, and sort of keeping up with technology as it's changed. Especially since it's in PHP, the language, PHP evolves just astronomically in every major release. And so as you get those new features and functionality, you can get better performance and it can do all kinds of other things that it just couldn't before because the language didn't allow it. And so that's been the change. But this functionality we talked about is really applies to all versions of Drupal and, as far as I know, into the future. So this really does scratch the surface of how Drupal content management does work. But as you get into, if you get into a Drupal site, you'll be able to find your way around a bit easier, understanding those concepts. So most of this is managed under structure. And so if we go to structure and then content types, these are your different node types you have. So I don't have it. So let's create one. So if we create something called an article, and then we will just save this. There's all kinds of options, but it'll take us to a page where we can manage the fields associated to it. So we will create a new field for our article. I think our article needs just some body text. Oh, let's go back here actually. So when we click Add Field, we have an option of all the different kinds of data that we can store on this article. So we definitely want formatted text. So we'll just say, we'll just call this body for reasons. And then it can be what do we want to store it as? We'll just say long. So we'll save this. All right. So now we have this piece of content. So if we go to create, we can create an article. And so here's our article. It has the title. It has a body. If we want to add more kinds of data to it, so we can add a Boolean, I don't know. We'll just add a quick one right there. Oops. It'll be called cats for some reason. So we'll add that on, and so now we have this second field. So if we refresh the creation page, there we are. We have a Boolean displayed in the basic way. We have these tabs too, so we can manage the form. So if we wanted to change the order, we want people to set cats first, and we don't want it to be a checkbox. Oh, we only have checkboxes. It's not going to be radio boxes. But we can control how it's rendered. So if we save that, then we can control how it's done, and then the same thing on that final page for editing how it looks.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I think we have time for one last question, and then I should probably start unplugging. All right, well, thank you very much. If you have any questions about Drupal or anything, you're welcome to come and stop me. I'll be around probably at the cold front booth. So thanks a lot, and have a great Drupal camp.